The North Woods of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan is a land of legends. Indian legends, legends of hunters and trappers, lumberjacks and miners. There are modern legends too, like the one about locomotives living out of time. Legends like the centuries of the North Woods. Locomotives out of time. These Alco Century 628s survive on the Chicago and North Western long after Alcos had disappeared from other major American railroads. When Alcos started becoming elusive, these centuries claimed a territory all their own and held the EMDs at bay for over a decade. While Alcos were coming off the main line and onto the deadline, these centuries were on the road every day, showing the grime but not the scars of 2 decades of heavy service. Even as the 11th hour approached, these centuries delivered performance that would have made Alco proud. The centuries of the North Woods were a remarkable fleet of locomotives, with a remarkable story behind them. We'll see where the story begins in the great horsepower race. We'll see them in action on the Northwestern's Lakeshore Division. We'll follow them over the road on ESGBA . And we'll meet the people who keep them running in Green Bay shops. The Century 628 was a product of the great horsepower race of the early 1960s when railroads were demanding more and more power from each new unit. More horsepower meant fewer units were needed to haul a given train. More horsepower also meant higher purchase and maintenance costs, but a railroad could take these in stride when 2 C628s came close to replacing 4 F units. In 1953, most road freight diesels being built were in the 1500 to 1600 horsepower range. Fairbanks Morse touched off the horsepower race with their 2400 horsepower H24 66, the Trainmaster. Alco was next in line, introducing the 2400 horsepower RSD-7 in 1955. They followed up a year later with the 2400 horsepower RSD-15, the famous Alligators. General Motors' Electromotive division would match FM and Alco with their 2400 horsepower SD24 in 1959. The same year, General Electric took the lead with their 2500 horsepower U25B, but Alco wasn't through. The C628 was the world's most powerful single-engine diesel when the first 4 units, Atlantic Coastline 2000 through 2003, rolled out of Alco's plant in Schenectady, New York in December 1963. The Centuries were Alco's newest and last family of locomotives. They boasted features such as inertial air filters, improved engine room access, and sealed pressurized car bodies to keep dirt away from the machinery. The model number indicates 6 axles and 2,750 horsepower. The C628 was king of the hill for a year and a half until the next advance in locomotive technology. The horsepower race reached a plateau with the C628. 2,800 horsepower was the practical limit for a generator that would fit inside a locomotive hood. Because of this, the C628 and C855, along with General Electric's U28B and U28C, would become the most powerful domestic locomotives with a straight DC transmission. The C628s were high-tech units for their day. Multi-stage transition meant a complicated and potentially troublesome electrical system. The horsepower race would have to wait for the development of high-capacity rectifiers. The builders could then use alternators that handle more power and take up less space than generators. It didn't take long. Alco again took the lead by introducing the first American locomotive with an AC-DC rectifier transmission, the C630, in July 1965. Before the last C628 rolled out in December of 1968, EMD was selling 3,600 horsepower SD45s as fast as they could build them. Technology had superseded the C628 almost before its trucks got dirty. The 2,750 horsepower was yesterday's news, and its complicated electrical system would spell an early retirement for many of the units. The C628 was moderately successful for Alco, with 186 units going to 12 customers, 8 in the United States, 3 in Mexico, and 1 in Australia. It was Alco's second most popular 6-motor unit, and only the RSD-5 sold more. Probably the most distinctive C628s were the 30 units purchased by Norfolk and Western. C&NW received 10 units, numbered 1100 through 1109, in October and November of 1965. A second order for 20 units, numbered 1110 through 1129, was delivered from March through May of 1966. At 202 and 204 tons respectively, These two orders were the heaviest C-628s built, and the only ones with a high short hood. They were equipped with dual control stands for both short and long hood forward operation. Their great weight, good lugging ability, and dynamic brakes should have made them good units for N&W's endless coal trains. N&W later received 10 high-nose C-630s, numbered 1130 through 1139, the last 5 of which rode on trucks from traded-in FM trainmasters. However, the N&W soon became disillusioned with its fleet of big centuries. Alco left the locomotive business in 1969, leaving the 40 units orphans in a crowd of EMDs. The C-628's weight was not kind to the track. One roundhouse foreman in former Virginian territory said he was glad to see them go into storage because it was the only way to keep them off the ties. The straight DC transmissions of the C-628s were already becoming a maintenance headache. In the summer of 1971, almost all of the C-628s went into storage, where they would remain for a year. The C-630s would enjoy a new lease on life when they were teamed up with slugs built from trainmasters. They toiled on as heavy yard switchers long after most railroads had retired their Alcos. But the problem children, the C-628s, were destined to become the last fleet of 6-motor centuries in the U.S. Chicago and Northwestern and the legendary 1973 motive power shortage. The Northwestern was gobbling up motive power as fast as they could, buying re-engined Katie Baldwins, second-hand Jeeps and F-units, rebuilding their own power, and ordering the first of 135 SD40-2s. That still wasn't enough, so they leased an exotic collection of locomotives. Duluth, Mesab, and Iron Range SD9s, Alton and Southern RS2s, RSD12s and U-23Cs from Lasco, the leasing subsidiary of Lake Superior and Ishpeming, at least one C-628 from the Delaware and Hudson, EMD switchers from the Peoria and Pekin Union and the Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis, and Union Pacific SD24s, SD24Bs, SD40s, and even 11 massive U-50s. In February 1973, the Northwestern leased 6 C-628s and 4 C-630s from the Norfolk and Western. The C-630s were quickly returned, but the Northwestern was so impressed with the C-628s that in May they bought all 30 at $130,000 each. All of them were pressed into service. They were renumbered 6701 through 6730 and were initially based out of Cedar Lake, the former Minneapolis and St. Louis facility in Minneapolis. From there, they ran mainline freights to Chicago and Omaha. In 1975, the Northwestern was searching for new power for its iron ore lines at Michigan's Upper Peninsula. The venerable Fairbanks Morse H-1666 Junior Trainmasters had reached the end of their economic lives. The Northwestern was not pleased with the performance of EMD units in the slow, heavy hauling, and dynamic braking that the ore trains required. The Alcos seemed well suited to this service, however, and in June 1975, the C-628s were dispatched to Escanaba, Michigan, to retire the last of the junior trainmasters. The rest, as they say, is history. Probably the most remarkable aspect of the years the C-628 spent in the ore country is how little they have changed. By the fall of 1986, the 6700s had been the last C-628s in service in the U.S. for several years, although C-628s remained in service in Mexico. Of the 30 units the Northwestern had purchased, only 5 had been retired. 3-unit lash-ups on 110-car ore drags was still the rule, and the C-628 still forged the former ore division's link with the rest of the Northwestern at Green Bay. During those 11 years, the rest of the Northwestern's Alco fleet saw many changes. More Alcos were acquired. an RS-11 from Southern subsidiary Carolina and Northwestern in 1973, and 10 ex-New York Central RS-32s from Conrail in 1980. The Northwestern retired the last of its 244-engined Alcos in 1981, repowering the Alco line in Minnesota and South Dakota with Jeeps. The 251-engined Alcos were sent to Green Bay to concentrate all the Alcos in one region, but by mid-1986, when these scenes were videotaped, only the 6700s remained. Except for the occasional Zito Yellow unit and the appearance of Fred on most ore trains, these scenes could be 1976 as easily as they are 1986.